Hello, hello. Happy Friday. My name is Shannon Gilmore with Third Eye Nutrition, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the differences between a nutritionist, a dietitian, and a functional nutritionist. Now, I bring this up because I think most people actually don't know the difference, and at some point, you're probably going to need to seek out someone for some help with your health conditions, whether it's weight loss or um, diabetes or whatever it is. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between them. Um, One of the biggest differences can be the educational background. That's something you see commonly. But it's not just in terms of education, it can also be the point of view of which they're being educated. Okay, so the perspective how they're being trained can be a huge difference. I wouldn't necessarily say one is better than the other because I've met some amazing practitioners from each department. But if you have like a stage 5 cancer versus you just want to lose 10 pounds weight loss, you actually might need a very different person for each of those problems. So let's start with a nutritionist. A nutritionist is a bit of a loose term, to be quite honest. Anyone can become a nutritionist. And what I mean by that is like Dr. Phil calls himself a nutritionist when really he has a PhD in psychology. Okay. Anyone can take like a 3-month class or a 1-year class and call themselves a nutritionist. They may or may not have a really solid science background. They could. They also may not necessarily have like a really good basis in research analysis, which is actually really important because if you are recommending things, most of the time we're basing these things on what we see in science. And you have to be really savvy at looking at research and knowing good research from just basically research that has been influenced by industry or research that is statistically manipulated so that it can prove something. Okay, that's you have to be able to like analyze that well, and nutritionists may or may not be able to do that. With that said, I have met some really amazing nutritionists. So the skill level is pretty varied, and so you really don't know what you're getting with a nutritionist. So how do you know? Well, word of mouth is a good way to find out. Like if a lot of people are going to them and they're getting really awesome results, they're doing something right. And if they've got like a long wait list, that's another good sign that people are getting results with that person. I will say that nutritionists tend to be a little bit more open-minded or a lot more open-minded than, let's say, some of the other people. So that's something to think about if you are like a biohacker or whatever, you want to like play around a bit. You're going to have very different reactions from like a nutritionist than, let's say, a dietitian. Okay. Speaking of dietitian, let's go on to that one. So a dietitian has a pretty vigorous science-based background. Okay, they have to have a 4-year undergraduate degree. They have some type of dietetic program that's 1 to 2 years long. That includes both coursework as well as working in hospitals. They're working one-on-one with doctors, nurses. They're working in different chronic diseases. So they're working with cancer patients, renal patients, they're working in pediatrics, geriatrics, the ICU unit. They get exposed to a lot. So they know the conventional medicine very well. They know drugs very well. And they've got a really, really solid background in the human body and science in general. They do have to take a test at the end, a national test to pass to get their certification. And then they have to maintain that every 5 years. They have to maintain their continuing education units. So they have to continuously be studying. The thing that's different about the dietitians, though, is that they tend to be much more conservative. And this doesn't apply to everyone, obviously. These are just general, vague sort of, from my perspective, this is sort of just to help you distinguish them, but not everyone falls into these categories. Dietitians tend to be very conservative and very methodical about that, how they do things. So everything they recommend is almost always going to be found in science. And they are always backed or trained by sort of the major associations, largely being the American Dietetic Association or the American Nutrition Dietetic Association, okay? But also like the Diabetes Association, the Heart Disease Association, like all these major associations are sort of influencing their training to some extent. And all those associations, especially in terms of the one that I know about is the American Dietetic Association, like they are very political. So keep that in mind. but the thing about it is that they are conservative how they approach things. Okay, so if you went to a dietitian, let's say, and said, "Hey, I'm on the gluten-free diet, and what do you think about that?" They're going to say, "Why would you be on a gluten-free diet? Are you celiac?" Something like that. That's the typical response. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you are a bit of a biohacker or you are trying to figure things out yourself, that they're probably going to be very, very mired in science. Okay, which is not a bad thing, but certainly conventional versus like functional medicine is going to be two very different perspectives. So speaking of functional medicine, let's go on to a functional nutritionist. So functional nutritionists may or may not be as educated in terms of the science field as maybe a dietitian. Typically they are, but I don't know, maybe not always. It's not like a prerequisite to be enrolled. But I will say that the coursework is quite vigorous. And there's a lot of biochemistry and a lot of science in it. And so I can't imagine someone that would have a very little background in science they would probably get lost, to be honest. And so I'm assuming that most people that are functional nutritionists actually have a really, really solid science background. They, let's see, are always trained under the scope of functional medicine. So the umbrella of the functional medicine is going to be sort of a different perspective, very different than conventional medicine, which is what the dietetic world is like. They are going to be looking at the holistic perspective. They're going to be looking at the total health and all the different things that play into it. So let's say if you have diabetes, a dietitian is going to be working with a doctor and the medications. They're going to be running the insulin to make sure you get your insulin right. And they're just basically working with you to figure out your diabetes. The functional nutritionists probably say, well, why did your type 2 diabetes start in the first place? Let's go back further and go to the root cause of where's this inflammation coming from? Let's find out, okay? And the crazy thing about functional nutrition is that you're seeing reversal, or at least pausing sort of the disease development with functional nutrition. So you're seeing autism go away. You're seeing Alzheimer's going away. You're seeing crazy things that conventional medicine says, no, that's not possible. They're going to be on drugs the rest of their life. It's changing in functional nutrition. So they just tend to be a lot more open-minded, and they have a different approach about how they look at the human body. So using our gluten example, if you went to the functional nutritionist and said, hey, I went off gluten, what do you think about that? They're probably gonna be like, that's a good idea. That's a great idea. Okay. So two totally different perspectives. So which one's good for you? Well, it depends on what's going on in your body. I mean, all three can certainly help you make lifestyle changes and habit changes. And if you're trying to lose weight, all three can help you perfectly well. I think where dietitians really shine is that if you have if stuff goes down, like really go down, like you got diagnosed with stage 5 cancer, and you're working on chemotherapy and radiation, you're getting treatments, like that's where they really shine. Or let's say your mom has Alzheimer's and she no longer can swallow and she's been diagnosed with dysphagia. They would have to put a tube in her to feed her, and you have to have a dietitian that's going to pick up the formula and prescribe the adequate amount of nutrients for her. Okay, so a functional nutritionist and a nutritionist cannot do that legally. They cannot do that, and they probably wouldn't even be trained and know how to do that. Okay, same with being fed in the hospital through your IV. Okay, no one's going to know how to do that but a dietitian. So that's where they really, really shine. They're very good at working in the conventional medical field to maintain a chronic disease. Okay, if you have any type of autoimmunity issues, hormones, adrenal issues, you want to lose weight, all that stuff, the functional nutritionist is awesome at going to the root cause and finding not only finding the cause, but then like the problem, but they're going to be able to maybe even reverse it or get you off your medications. Okay, so they're very, very different perspectives, and it's really what you need. It's going to determine that. I will say with all three of them, regardless of where you go, because again, I've met some amazing nutritionists and amazing dietitians and amazing functional nutritionists. I think it's important that who you go to, they can give you practical, usable advice, because you could meet someone that's a functional nutritionist that has like all this biochemistry and all this amazing information, but if you can't translate it to day-to-day life, that's not going to help you. Okay. Which is probably actually nutritionists are really good at that. Like, you need to translate it to the day-to-day life. It's just a bunch of information at that point. Do you connect with them? Okay. And most importantly, do you feel safe with them? You know, you're telling some pretty personal things. Especially with weight and stuff, it can get very shaming, and you need someone that you can feel comfortable with. Okay. And also how much money you have, to be honest. Like, functional nutritionists are probably going to cost more. Okay. Because dietitians tend to take insurance typically, so your insurance can cover it. So it just really depends on like how deep you want to go, and what would be helpful and useful for you, and how much money you have, you know, and how much disposable income you have to work on your health. Okay. So hopefully that was helpful for you. I really just want to help prevent people from spending money down the road on practitioners that really aren't qualified or equipped to help them, or might be overkill. Like, you don't need that qualified of a person. Okay, so hopefully it'll help distinguish and tease out a little bit what's going to help you. So maybe next week we'll talk a little bit more specifically about functional nutrition, so that you to see if that's something that you'd actually want to bring into your life. But until then, have a lovely weekend, and we will see each other next Friday. Ciao.